Hi there, and thanks for listening. My name is Daniel Kringer, and this is the SkanFest podcast, an interview series for the Skaneateles Festival, a summer concert series based in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. In these talks, we are spending time getting to know our visiting artists who travel the world making music at the very top of their field. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with conductor Nicholas Hersh. Nicholas is a sought-after conductor around the United States and is full-time music director for the Modesto Symphony. He's also an orchestrator and arranger, adapting everything from Beethoven to Freddie Mercury. Thanks so much for making the time to be here, Nicholas.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
So we'll talk about your work, both current and upcoming, but I'd just like to start by asking you a little bit about how things started for you. So tell me how you got started in music.
Sure. So I have a semi-musical family, you might say. Neither of my parents are musicians, but I have relatives on, especially my dad's side, who are or were in some cases professional musicians. But my dad, though, he was a real fan of classical music, and he always had it playing in the house. He would always have the car on their classical music station, and he were subscribers to the Lyric Opera Chicago, and I started going when I was maybe about 5 or 6 years old.
And that's where you grew up.
And that's where I grew up in the Chicago area. Yeah. And I actually came home one day from school. We had a great public school system where in third grade they brought out all the string instruments and brought us all to an assembly to show us what the string instruments were. We had a great music program there, and I just said I want to do that, and I had this sort of eeny miny mo moment, or it's more like Goldilocks actually, because I was like
choosing your Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. I was like the violin is too small, the bass is too big. I didn't know what a viola was, so I picked the cello.
Great.
And I stuck with the cello then, all the way, till now to some degree. I went to college knowing that I wanted to study cello. Then I went to grad school actually having already caught the conducting bug, although I continued to play cello through then as well.
And how did you make that transition into, that's my next question, how did you end up really getting serious on that?
So the story I like to tell is that I found myself disagreeing with things my youth orchestra conductors were doing. I was very nice about it.
Yeah.
I was a team player. I really loved. But that's the thing. I really loved playing orchestra music. I was so enamored with the first time I played Beethoven and Mahler and Prokofiev. I mean, these big, massive swaths of sound. I really wanted to get in on that, and I remember very clearly as well going to see the Chicago Symphony and Michael Tilson Thomas doing a Mahler second that literally blew my hair back. I was sitting right under the organ and with the right above the brass. It was just an incredible one of those sort of transformative moments for me. And from there, I knew that even though I was going to go to school mostly to study cello at that point, I was already interested in conducting. And then I applied as a conductor then for grad school.
Mm-hmm. And things just kind of got deeper and deeper from there.
That's right.
Fantastic. So are there conductors who are, like you mentioned, Michael Tilson Thomas, other contemporary or past that inspire you?
Sure. Well, I had two wonderful teachers at IU, Indiana University, where I went to grad school, David Efron and Arthur Fagan, who really guided me so beautifully in terms of figuring out who I was as both a musician and specifically a conductor, because there really isn't like an established conducting technique. You kind of have to figure out what works for your body, what works to be the most sort of demonstrative and communicative and the most effective, essentially. But my first job was with the Baltimore Symphony as their assistant conductor, and in those days it was Maren Alsop. She was the one who hired me there, and I love Maren. Maren has been a mentor and a friend and a colleague, someone who I can rely on both for musical advice and also career advice, and just a shoulder to lean on sometimes too. So she's been very influential. I actually met again Tilson Thomas recently in the last couple of years. I covered. That is, I sort of assisted conducting for him at a couple of concerts in New York and DC, and he's still very, very inspiring.
Yeah, it must have been like a full circle moment. For
yeah,
you.
certainly. And then more recently too, I've been doing a lot of work with and for the conductor Ivan Fischer, who's based mostly in Europe and Budapest. And I'll actually be going out to Budapest in September to go work with him.
Fantastic. So pivoting a little bit, I want to know what you listen to. Classical music, non-classical music, like what is going through. I know that conductors, a lot of them are very kind of specific with their taste, as particularly with class, like this is the best recording of the Beethoven symphonies and whatnot. Where are you on that spectrum?
I would say I'm not quite so dogmatic, you might say, about that. I mean, I do have my favorite recordings, my favorite recordings of symphonies and, classical pieces. But I'm kind of an omnivore, actually. I really like, in fact, just the other month, my wife and a couple of friends and I, we went to a double feature on Broadway to go see Merrily We Roll Along and Six, because we all really love Broadway.
Contrast,
and those are actually Six especially, that's a very sort of eclectic soundtrack, essentially.
Speaking of different styles.
Exactly, of pop. And I mean, I love Sondheim. Sondheim is I mean, he really sort of crosses that line between kind of classical and or kind of art music and more popular music, you might say. So yeah, I really love anything that has sort of a story to tell and a strong voice. I've even my wife really likes Taylor Swift. I've even come to enjoy a little bit of her stuff as well. So I mean, but mostly what I'm listening to when I'm not studying or preparing something, I'm actually mostly listening to audiobooks and podcasts.
Okay. Yeah.
Things
Great.
like that.
We love podcasts here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so speaking a little bit more about music and the role, you've talked a little bit about sort of how you got inspired to get into cello and then conducting and whatnot. So what about all this makes music meaningful for you as you continuing to get deeper and deeper into things? Can be a tough question.
Yeah. Why do music? Yeah. I mean, so there's something really beautiful, I think, about sharing an experience with an orchestra and with an audience. For instance, I mean, this program that we're doing this weekend here is probably a lot of music that people will be hearing for the very first time, I imagine. But we're also doing Rhapsody in Blue, and that piece, that sort of permeated the sort of public subconscious in a big way, of course. Yeah. But I'm sure it'll be someone's first time hearing Rhapsody in Blue. Yeah. And that connection, that experience of hearing these amazing works of art, whether it's for the first time, whether it's for the 50th time, that can really be special. It's a sort of the fact that we're all gathered together in the same place, almost like a congregation of some sort. Yeah. I mean, that's really, people took time out of their lives to come and experience this art, and I think that deserves 150% effort and insight and thought from us as musicians.
And so sort of playing off that, although you might have already sort of answered this question, which is more what keeps you sort of inspired to kind of keep moving forward with the schedule of performing that and creating that you have? You're always kind of collaborating with, you're meeting new people. For instance, you're here for the first time. A lot of these musicians you're meeting for the first time. So how do you keep that energy moving forward? Or you're always working on new projects and whatnot? It can be a lot.
Yeah, it can be a lot. It can be tiring. Certainly, it's a lot of travel too. It's a lot of nights in hotels and things like that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I love SkanFest because I get to stay at someone's home, which is beautiful. Thank you, Lori, if you're watching.
I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
But I mean, again, it's hard in those moments when I'm really sort of feeling the jet lag or just the fatigue. It's important to remind yourself of what we were just speaking of, right. Why we do this, why music is important. And it's in those moments when you really want to open the score with fresh eyes, when you're in the hotel room, when it's 10 o'clock at night and you just got off a plane and there's a rehearsal the next morning, looking at a score with excitement about what's in the music, and just to sort of remind yourself of why you love this music in the first place, what makes Beethoven so interesting to you, and finding those ways to discover that again, because you can lose it through cynicism in a way sometimes too. But I think it's important to make sure that you are really loving what you're doing, because if you're otherwise the schedule is too grueling to keep doing it if you're not having a good time doing it.
Yeah, fantastic. So getting into career stuff, I want to ask you about some early days at Indiana University, where you led a couple of arranging projects with the ensembles there, including an orchestration of Bohemian Rhapsody that really kind of exploded, right? It's at like 11 million views on YouTube.
Something like that. I mean, it's a little bit old now, but yeah.
People listening, you should find it because it is very cool. So and there's some other projects that, were shared as well. So how did that all sort of come about? It seemed like you were really putting something together there, and you had some drive for it. So.
Sure. Well, I mean, the arranging thing, I think that like the whole reason for it, why I started doing it was similar, I think, to my love for just playing in orchestras. I found the experience of not composing necessarily, but rejiggering forces for different or music for different forces. I found that very rewarding, and I started that actually way back in high school, just doing some sort of small kind of projects just for me. But then through college, through grad school, I never really had quite formal training in composition and orchestra. I had some classes here and there, but I really just learned orchestration from the scores I was studying as a conductor. I mean, you look at Rimsky-Korsakov and Ravel and Beethoven, even to some degree too. I mean, these people knew the orchestras, and you can really learn how to produce certain timbres and sounds from an orchestra just by sort of looking at the scores. But so the Bohemian Rhapsody story, that came about because a buddy of mine, we were doing a concert together at IU. It was a sort of ad hoc student orchestra, and she was doing a viola concerto. She was a violist, and we were ending the program with this viola concerto which ends very sort of mysteriously and sort of on a downer. So we wanted a kind of upper to something fun to end that program with. And so I remember there was a commercial on at some point on TV that was using Bohemian Rhapsody, and sort of as I was looking for something to program on this concert, I was like, that could actually make a pretty cool arrangement for viola and orchestra.
Well, yeah, I think Freddie Mercury at some point described it as sort of an operatic.
Yes, it absolutely
is. Yeah.
Well, and I think the reason that piece in particular lends itself so well to the orchestral treatment is because it's not a strophic verse-chorus structure. It's a tripartite. It's almost sonata form, as we like to call it in the business. It's ABA with that opera section, as Freddie Mercury called it, in the middle. So it lent it. I mean, I started writing it, and like the pen almost moved for me because it was just it just did it so naturally. I experimented with a couple of things, but so I mean, we did it as an encore essentially to this program, and not thinking that it would go anywhere from there. But someone posted that original recording of that performance to YouTube, and that started taking off, getting a couple 100,000 views pretty quickly. And then IU actually asked us to do like a proper studio recording of it, which I actually adapted. I expanded the orchestration slightly to use more of the orchestra.
And now you're doing much more of the arranging and orchestrating professionally. So what do you enjoy about that now that you've sort of taken it to its final form, right?
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's, in some cases, it's kind of like putting together a puzzle for me. It scratches that same kind of itch where...
Do you get specific requests from ensembles?
Oh yeah. I'm getting several commissions now for an ensemble in Europe to do chamber orchestra arrangements of very specific composers that mostly have written for chamber ensembles, string quartets, string trios, that sort of thing, and expanding them into a kind of chamber orchestra format. So that's something I've been doing a lot of. I've also done a lot of professional pop arrangements that aren't Bohemian Rhapsody, although that keeps getting played here and there as well. I just had an arrangement I did originally for fun back at IU of one of the Beethoven cello sonatas for cello and piano. I adapted the piano part for orchestra, so it became a cello concerto. And someone from Europe wanted to do that with an orchestra in the Netherlands, and they did that, I think, 2 years ago now, I think, and gave the premiere of the full complete sonata as well. So that's been fun to work on. And what I like about that kind of work is that I also like to understand how the composer might have orchestrated it themselves. So when it comes to Beethoven, I try to orchestrate as if Beethoven were
cool.
As if Beethoven had written the piano part, essentially, for orchestra. And I'm also doing some work with Clara Schumann as well, who is a phenomenally underrated talent as a composer. She was known in her day hugely as a pianist, but not so much as a composer.
Yep.
And so I've been trying to find ways that work in that sort of 19th century Schumann orchestra sound when I do arrangements of Clara Schumann.
Yeah. Wow, cool.
Yeah.
So pivoting just a little bit, you kind of mentioned some time. You, as a conductor, you spend a bit of time on the road, maybe more than a bit of time, right? And you work with a lot of different musicians and ensembles. And I'm just curious to know, do you have any unique or memorable experiences from your performing and traveling?
Well, I mean, every concert, I mean, is precious, honestly. I mean, it's I mean, I've had some really, really memorable things. So some of the more memorable ones for me have been moments where I've had to jump in on short notice, which has happened several times to me, actually. Very memorably in 2019, I think it was, I jumped in with the National Symphony in D.C. On a program that featured all French music. It was Ravel, and a lot of Debussy, ending with La Mer, which is a difficult but insanely fun piece. And we got about 30 minutes of rehearsal on that before a concert at 8 p.m. that evening. But that it was nice because in a way all of the work had already been done, because the conductor unfortunately had an illness spring on him at the dress rehearsal. So he had rehearsed the whole orchestra. I just got to come in and ride his coattails and do one of the most fun and exciting and energetic performances I've been a part of. So those have been very memorable for sure.
Sort of part and parcel of the live performance sort of aspect of what classical musicians do, or live performers. So speaking of live music, you're here with the festival conducting a concert with orchestra. I wonder if you might share some thoughts a little bit about the program.
Sure. Well, so this program, actually, you could call it an American program, but it's actually music of all the Americas, both North and South America. So we have, of course, anchoring our program, we have Rhapsody in Blue, played by Aaron Wunsch, our one of our festival directors here.
Right.
And we have the Ginastera harp concerto. And by the way, I'm not mispronouncing Ginastera's name. It's not Ginastera. He actually preferred the Catalan G, Ginastera.
That's good to know, because there's a lot of different opinions on that, even just in this building.
Yes, indeed. But apparently,
I was expressly told something else, so that's good to know from the conductor.
Apparently, Ginastera's family came from the Catalan region of Spain,
and they are independent
originally, and they wanted that soft G. So the Ginastera Concerto played by Bridget Kivy, and so those are sort of our two entrees on the program, and it's nice because they are both sort of what you might think of as unserious music made serious. And that's actually maybe even a little bit unfair. It's not that it's unserious, it's just more of the people's music made, transformed into what you might think of more sort of art concert music. Ginastera used a lot of his sort of Argentinian roots to evoke very strong rhythms and sort of dance-like qualities, but he had this very rigid, formal education that gives it this sense of this is a real concerto. This is a real piece of music. His writing for the harp is insane. He has the harp play percussion at various times,
Yep.
and he just uses it's really a frenetic and hugely fun piece to both play and listen to. Rhapsody in Blue, of course, being the original jazz concerto, taking forms of jazz and bringing them to the concert hall, and we know them now, of course, as the United Airlines, jingles. But it's so much more than that. Trust me.
Of course, yeah.
But then other pieces on this program too. We have a bit of Gabrielina Frank, who's a living composer. She's American, but of a mixed race, with some South American roots as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she likes to explore a lot of Peruvian influence, and this piece of hers called Escaramuza, which means skirmish in Spanish. It's a type of ancient Incan war dance, essentially, and it starts out with this amazing bass drum solo, and it's this marathon sprint for the percussion and the strings all the way through. And then we have a bit of Arturo Marquez, who's a Mexican composer. His danzones, the danzón being a popular dance originating from Cuba and then making its way to the Veracruz region of Mexico. Very famously, he wrote his danzón number 2, which has sort of blown up, and that's his most popular piece. But he's written 9 danzones now, and number 4 is a beautiful, sexy, slow-moving dance that slowly builds and builds and builds, and it's just a really wonderful listen. And then ending our program, actually, we have a piece that I'm sure many folks will recognize. It's the Charleston, and I mean the Charleston by the original James P. Johnson, who is known as the father of stride jazz piano playing. And he wrote this. I mean, did you know, by the way, that Charleston isn't a genre of dance, but in fact, it comes from a specific song.
I thought it was a move.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly,
you thought it was the knee move.
Interesting.
But it's
know.
based on this song that Johnson wrote, I believe, for a musical. Called Charleston, and you can even hear Charleston. That's where
cool.
that's where that rhythm comes from. So we have an arrangement of the original Charleston as done by James P. Johnson to end our program, which also features Aaron Wunsch playing piano.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah,
nice program. Yeah. So playing off that, do you have any? Let's thinking about the future. Do you have any ongoing or upcoming projects that you're excited about that you'd like to share some information on? And that's where we'll kind of finish up.
I'm really looking forward to my upcoming 2024-25 season. I have some debuts and some returns with some really great orchestras. I get to do a Beethoven 9 in Nashville, nice. which is always fun. Always
big production.
It's a war horse, but every time I do it, I'm just I'm so in awe of that someone could write this. It's just it's an important reminder. And so we have a great season at the Modesto Symphony Orchestra as well, featuring some wonderful soloists, and my very first Verdi Requiem at the end of the season as well. So and then some there's Tucson and Omaha and Madison and Florida, as well as I mentioned, a trip to Budapest at the beginning of the season as well. So it's a busy season ahead. I have some arranging projects that'll be, in fact, in Budapest. One of my arrangements will be played there as well. So it's an exciting season ahead.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Well, Nicholas is with us for a Saturday, August 3rd concert with Orchestra West Hill High School in Syracuse, New York. You can learn more about Skaneateles Festival events and buy tickets at www.skanfest.org. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Daniel.